Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful July day. I know it's probably summer vacation for some of you, but we are going to get started with our webinar of teaching strategy through simulation. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our team here. My name is Christina Perry, and I am the Director of Organizational Learning at Peregrine Global Services. That title, you might want to be wondering, what do I do? It's actually not unlike what an assessment coordinator might do or someone involved with institutional effectiveness. I look at what outcomes Peregrine would like to achieve and what those outcomes should be, not just from a financial perspective, but from people and processes, sustainability. And then I go about saying, how do we gather the data to assess our performance and then use that to set targets for continuous improvement. I've been with the company about 6 years now, really enjoy my work, and I'm glad you could join us today. And with me is my friend Jody Rich.
Hi, I'm Jody Rich. I am a client engagement specialist with Peregrine Global Services. I am one of the newest team members. I joined the team in April of this year. My background is human resources, so I bring a kind of a different spin to the team. I am primarily responsible for helping our clients understand what our products and services are and how they can best implement them and get the most benefit from them at their institutions.
Thank you, Jody. So before we get started, I kind of like to give you a roadmap of where we're going. So here are the topics we're going to cover in today's presentation. We call this teaching strategy through simulation, but really it's about more than strategy. We're going to go into the research on business strategy and simulation, but also how that improves critical thinking, problem solving, analysis, implementation. We're going to compare and contrast using simulation with traditional teaching methods and where it might compensate for some of the drawbacks of traditional methods. And then we're going to close out by talking about the advantages of having students take ownership of their learning, which is kind of the purpose of the simulation, is to have them sit in the driver's seat and take control. So as we go through the webinar, we've got you booked for an hour. We're not going to take a full hour. We will have time at the end for some questions and answers. There also, if you want to interact, there's a chat box, there's a Q&A box in the Zoom panel. I'm sure you're all quite familiar with it over the past year, but you can go ahead and type those in, make a comment, make a question, and we're going to have 2 or 3 poll questions where we'd ask you to vote along with your peers here, so we can gather a little bit of information from you. That information is my lifeblood. It keeps my curiosity flowing, and so please do vote with those. So in this first section, as I talked about, we're going to give a quick overview of literature in the field of strategic management education. Rather than just giving our own experiences, there's some really smart people that have done some great studies. We're going to kind of share some of that work with you. There are really 2 sides to teaching strategy, and this is a theme I came up on time and again in the literature. The first part of it is that theoretical and conceptual knowledge. These are kind of the building blocks. Is your Porter's 5 forces, SWOT analysis. These sort of tools that you can use, I would say, more to begin your critical thinking about your business strategy. And these, gathering and acquiring these concepts, that ties into the lower level Bloom's thinking of knowledge, comprehension, application. But there's another side to teaching strategy, which is taking those building blocks and doing something with them. And those are the higher level Bloom's areas of analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So the critical thinking and analysis side of teaching strategy is something that some of the traditional methods may neglect. So what we're looking at here is a more effective pedagogical approach, which means developing students' abilities to extract meaning, draw inferences, and apply the knowledge acquired through analysis of internal and external dynamics to arrive at strategic options, to not see things as black and white. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. And I'll give you the references at the end of our presentation, but this is referring to an Albert and Grezda study from 2015. Okay, so there are also, when we talk about our traditional methods of teaching, there are a lot of advantages and learning opportunities available through expertise and literature, but simulation methodologies offer some unique learning opportunities. And I want to go over 4 of them with you here. First one is the academic professional linkage. So classroom instruction provides an artificial setting for learning. So the information is stripped of context, whereas simulations offer direct encounters with the studied phenomena. Simulations recreate the types of environments students may encounter in their professional roles. And that can be complete with stress and competing demands and being feel like you're pulled in many directions. Another unique learning opportunity with simulations is this idea of equifinality, that there are many roads to success. So some methodologies can lead to oversimplification, just looking at a problem through one lens. This is the case study. This is the tool we're going to use. How do you analyze it? There's a single approach to arrive at an optimal solution. But simulations are a better tool for examining the dynamism of business environment. They use multiple perspectives and promote flexibility in thinking. Next, action learning. Simulation, different from other methodologies, are more reciprocal in nature. So my past decisions are going to affect the choices that come up, but they'll also change the way I think about them. There's a sort of cycle of information that the more I learn, the more I question, and I can do things in a different way. I can revisit my past decision and make changes and further stimulate my learning. And then finally, the autonomy of the learning process. Simulation methodology reverses the roles of actors in the learning process. So there's not the sage on the stage, there's the guide on the side idea. Learners are given a high degree of autonomy, which leads to greater involvement and higher order learning as they realize they're the ones in the driver's seat. So when you think about those type of benefits to simulation, we can see how they could be used to develop critical thinking. In my own experience, meeting with professionals in higher education, many of you are looking for ways to develop students' critical thinking. And research supports the idea that simulations are an effective tool, offering a replication of real world experiences. In the simulations, decisions are made in a complex system, and students develop critical thinking skills through practice and experimentation. They get feedback on their performance, and they can use those opportunities of reflection to change their recommendations. So I do like this definition of critical thinking too, this one from Russo. Critical thinking involves questioning assumptions, evaluating evidence, and testing the logic of ideas, proposals, and courses of actions. And to me, that's necessarily iterative in nature, and it means doing it time and again and looking at it from different perspectives. So as we said, this is a literature review. There is evidence to back up this claim that simulations improve critical thinking. The reference here is to a Lovelace et al. Study from 2016, where researchers were interested in assessing the utility of web-based simulations to develop critical thinking skills. Students were tested on their critical thinking prior to receiving any instruction in strategy. They then participated in longer duration strategy-based simulations and then reevaluated at the end to see if their critical thinking scores improved. Now, what I like was they did find that the scores improved, but these quotes I put on the slide, these are actually quotes from students on their experience. So this is their reflection, kind of that meta analysis, the thinking about the thinking. I understand the alternatives and consequences. I understand the implications. I can identify problems. So it really is speaking to the integration of that knowledge. So at this point, I'm going to take my breath. I tend to ramble a bit, but I have a poll question for you. And I've met with some of you on this call here to talk about your critical thinking, and some of you do use third-party assessment to analyze your students' critical thinking. Sometimes it's written assignments that you have a portfolio, there's a project, but I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll and see how you guys assess critical thinking among your students. So if you don't mind, I'll just leave this open. Jody, can you just give me, are we seeing the poll? Do you know?
Yep, I can see
Okay.
it just fine.
Great. Give people a minute or two. We'll wait until about half of people have voted here. Well, interesting to see here. There's some clear winners, and nobody's owning up to critical thinking not being assessed. So I guess that's good. We're all finding some way of assessing it, but there's definitely some different methods. It looks like we have almost 3/4 of people voting. So I'll go ahead and end that, and then I'll share the results here. So as you can see, written assignments
Wow.
are are the most, and we're seeing this, the results are written assignments. Almost 80% of you use written assignments to assess critical thinking, but performance tasks are right up there too. And I'd be, if anybody's willing to share in a chat or in a question and answer what kind of performance tasks you use, that's really interesting. Not too many with the third-party assessment or simulations. So I guess that's why you're joining us today. So I'm going to stop sharing the results and take that one down. Now, go back to my share screen. Okay, thank you all for participating in that poll. And with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Jody and talk about, because I was given the research background. The next part is about the simulation that Peregrine offers called the one-day experience. And this is something that you might consider offering for your students. So Jody, I'll turn off my microphone and let you take it away.
Thank you, Christina. In this next section, we will look at the one-day strategy simulation in which students spend one day in the life of North South Airlines human resources employee Emma. Tasked with saving the company, students must sift through information provided to their avatar, choose the strategy which has the best chances of making a dramatic change in NSA, and develop the action plan needed to implement their chosen strategy. Through the one-day experience, learners develop their critical thinking and problem-solving abilities, practice workplace skills such as time management and prioritization, and use quantitative reasoning to guide recommendations. Through a series of interviews with customers, employees, and competitors, Emma learns where North-South Airlines exceeds expectation and areas where they're lagging behind the competition. The simulated environment teaches students to prioritize assignments and determine irrelevant information provided by people they've interviewed. Concepts and knowledge gained from interviews as Emma help students determine the strategy they'd like to pursue to improve performance and customer perceptions of NSA. Students will use their chosen strategy to plan a course of action they will then present to the CEO of NSA by the end of the day to achieve the goals outlined in their strategy. Through the use of simulated industry reports and mock financial records, Emma gains insight into the inner workings of North-South Airlines. It helps her see areas of vast revenue generation, as well as areas with low generation of revenue. Students use this data to further evaluate information provided during their interviews and to support the strategy they have selected. These reports give Emma the opportunity to use quantitative reasoning to determine what's working for NSA's current strategy and the areas in need of improvement. The choice of strategy for the student begins to take on a numerical perspective, as well as customer and employee perception. One Day provides a simulated workplace-focused environment, very similar to the ones that graduates will encounter once they enter the workplace. The simulation helps teach students professionalism and work ethic, two highly desirable traits in the eyes of future employers. These, similar to real-life scenarios, are designed to be more relatable to graduates, instilling lessons about career management and pursuing opportunities when they're presented to you. One Day also does something no other simulation does. One Day throws real-life distractions into the mix, trying to derail Emma from her assignment. Real-life drama crops up on her cell phone in the form of texts and emails while she's trying to remain focused on the task she needs to complete.
Jody, I got to say that was one of the things when I was going through the simulation, compared to other simulations where you're a head honcho at an organization or you're working with a team. This is putting you on the spot of being that young professional trying to get, you're in a little bit over your head, trying to gather information and knowing you have to present to a boss, but also consult people while you're dealing with your personal issues. I found it really engaging.
I did too. And I also enjoyed the fact that they did throw in that real life drama, because it happens to all of us. Every day we're dealing with stuff outside of work that brings itself into our work hours, whether we want it to or not. And so it, to me, felt more like a real life scenario. And the other thing I really enjoyed was the fact, like you said, Emma is a lower level professional. Instead of being somebody that's higher up in the company that knows exactly how to go about what it is they've been tasked to do, Emma's going, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to do this. I don't know what you want from me. It's that frazzled moment that so many young professionals experience at their first job and first task of this nature.
But it's also thrilling when you figure it out. So yeah.
It is. It is. The next thing that I want to talk about, the one-day simulation helps students develop the soft skills that they need throughout their time as Emma. They learn customer and employee interactions in both oral and written communication capacities. Leadership skills such as organization, prioritizing information and events, and delegating tasks when necessary are enforced throughout Emma's day. Another crucial workplace skill students see through Emma's actions is time management. Emma is forced to use her limited time efficiently to get the most information out of her interviews, make her strategy decision quickly, and find facts to support her presentation to the CEO. Emma, or the student, also learns lessons about team-based operations and collaboration with other parties involved. Through interviews with customers, employees in a variety of departments, and competitor employees, Emma learns about how every department and person within the company is a cog in the wheel of North-South Airlines. Each piece is important to the functioning of the entire organization, but only if they all work together. And this quote by Albert Einstein was just interesting and seemed to kind of encompass everything that was one day. Information is not knowledge. The only source of knowledge is experience. You need experience to gain wisdom. And when I read that quote, it made me really think about one day, because I felt like I learned more through one day than I would have just reading a text or listening to a lecture. It was the actual experience, the actual doing of the tasks, and that made me retain the material and feel like I actually gained some wisdom.
Yeah, that's funny, Jody. I was thinking just this morning, I was talking about this presentation I was going to be giving with you today, talking
Mhm.
at home around the breakfast table. And I'm
Yep.
I'm from Wyoming, and my husband said, "Yeah, it's like my favorite thing is thinking about the rodeo.
Mhm.
You could take lessons, you can watch people
Yep.
do it, but until you get your butt on that bronc in the bucking chute, you don't know what you're going to
It's a
do."
whole new ball game.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's a bit of a Western experience, but it's the same
Yes,
thing. Until you do it, you don't know.
exactly.
Okay. So with that, I love talking to you guys. This is fun. So I'm going to go on and improving on traditional methods. So we're going to look at some of the traditional methods for teaching strategy, and no criticism to having that background of knowledge, that acquisition of theory. But how can we improve upon them to foster greater engagement and, more importantly, perhaps reflection? How can we get students to not just know that, but make it their own? So this slide presents some of the downsides to traditional teaching methods. That has a focus on knowledge as this acquisition of concepts without much attention to the external context. And it's easy to see how that type of methodology can stifle creativity or responsiveness. Now, if any of you are fans of social practice theories of learning, that thinking that people learn mainly through participation in social situations, you'll recognize the idea that trial and error and repeated interaction with people and tools, that's often the best way to really embed the knowledge. And not only is this type of learning more engaging, it lets a person find the best option amongst many possibilities. So that's what I'm going to be looking at here. So that's really the vision behind one day is some of this brain science behind how people learn. The creator of One Day is Dr. John Beck. We've got his picture there. He's a brilliant man. He's authored many books. He's a Harvard professor. But his whole career has been this constant search for the great university educational experience. So when he created One Day, his purpose was to make it as helpful as a mentor, as attention getting as a video game, and as practical and rigorous as on the job training. And I will say, Jody and I might make it sound like fun and games. This is a lot of work. This simulation is not something you whip out in one day. First of all, it's called One Day because it's one day in the life of the character, but it's 6 episodes. And each of those episodes is going to take, it'll take you a couple hours to get through just once. If you want to go back and make different choices, this is an engaging, takes you time. But anyway, the experiments that he started with One Day, this was kind of designed to see how well will students do compared to students taking a traditional strategy class. And in his experiments, the One Day participants outperformed their peers, and their peers attended an intensive strategy course with a Professor of the Year instructor. So even though they had great instruction from someone who really know their stuff, the students that were actually doing the simulation outperformed them on their final exams. So let's talk about the simulation itself. As I said, it's 6 episodes. Here, the screenshot shows I'm at the gate waiting for my airplane, and I have a number of people I can interact with, click on, discuss with. If I'm feeling a little introverted, there are some magazines and readings that are on the sides I can pick up, read those, and then there's some interactive quizzes, that type of thing. But really, it is about gathering information. If I don't know where to start with a strategy, I'm going to go in and talk and gather the voice of the customer, the employees that are working at there, kind of get that background and context. Now, each of the episodes, this is episode 1, each of the episodes has different characters, different artwork, different settings. And this really ties into the brain science behind it. They've If any of you have studied the idea of a memory palace, you know that people are very visual when they construct their memories. So when you can tie a different setting and different characters to different concepts, it helps you retrieve those memories more easily down the road, because you remember exactly where you were when you heard such a thing. So that is kind of the idea behind the design of the game. And then also, there's not a lot of instruction with the simulation. You really have to figure it out on your own as you go. You have a smartphone that you can click on, and you'll have your text messages, you'll have some articles, you'll have some emails coming in. But really, it's about piecing it together yourself. And this is kind of like an airplane pilot using a flight simulator. Yeah, it's not a big instruction booklet I have to memorize. It's I get in there and I do it, and I'm 10 times more likely to remember it when I've done it myself.
That's just it, Christina. It's really the get in and get your hands dirty concept of learning.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a little maybe scary for students who are used to the traditional assignments, but once they embrace that challenge, it can be fun. So this next one, the Lovelace article I cited earlier, it was titled "I Do and I Understand," and that goes back to this saying that's attributed to Confucius: "I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand." So this is the key to experiential learning and really the philosophy behind the one-day simulation. Students aren't just reading lessons and selecting correct responses. They're gathering information and adjusting the recommendations based on their learning. So Jody and I both talked about it. We went through the simulation ourselves, and you start out, you think you have a good idea of a strategy. I think I know where this is going, because the first person I talked to was a young mom traveling with kids, and oh my gosh, this airline should really cater to families better. But then as you gather more information, you might say, well, is that really the most profitable, sustainable option? So you start with one hypothesis, but then as you gather evidence, does that support it, or does it give you maybe another direction to go to? So you have to interpret data and reports, you have to prioritize the problems, and then match actions to those strategies that you're choosing.
That's very true. I found myself doing the same thing. I found myself being a bleeding heart at the beginning and feeling bad for the mom that's trying to travel with her kids and feeling stressed. And then the more people I talked to and the more reports I read, the more my business brain kicked in and started going, okay, but what's going to make the company the most money? What's the
Well,
most profitable
Well,
route?
and not just that, but who are their long-term customers? And not to
Yes.
give away too much of the simulation, but the North South Airlines here has, they like their business travelers. They have a
Mhm.
lot of frequent flyers, but they're being driven away from the lounge and the experience because it's becoming untenable for their work life. So,
Mhm.
there are a lot of different aspects that the learner has to consider. So that's what I wanted to talk about with this slide. Is really is about defining the problem and not jumping to solutions, right? The solutionitis can be a big problem when you think you know what it is, with all your assumptions. But there's an aphorism that's actually used in the simulation. That's one of Einstein's saying that said if he had 1 hour to save the world, he would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes working on a solution. So that's kind of the same idea here. The students can't jump to a solution. They can, but they're not going to do very well. So in one day, they're invited to challenge those assumptions and then find evidence that supports what they think they know. There's not one right answer. You could actually choose the strategy catering to families. There's a way to make that profitable and really serve a valuable segment of your market, but you have to be able to support that with evidence. So, and then finally, I want to talk about feedback. So there is assessment with feedback embedded in the simulation, and that can kind of go back. I was asking you, how do you assess critical thinking in your students? This is one way you could do it. There is assessment built in, but also not just assessment for assessment's sake, assessment for fostering student learning, if you will, because often students will get feedback on a final assignment or a capstone project after it's too late. They've turned it in, they've got their score, they're out the door. So with one day, they get feedback and chances to improve several times. So during the play of each episode, students receive feedback from other characters. So I might be talking to a mentor in there, and he's giving me some choices and say, you might want to rethink that. And maybe I'm talking to another character who's a stranger who might brush me off if I approach them with something that's completely irrelevant. Well, that gives me the feedback that I didn't ask very good questions, or I didn't take the right tack. So I might have to try that again. Then there are also assessments embedded with each episode. So that can show me if I've picked up some industry reports or some newspaper articles. There's some quizzing there that'll show me how well I understood. And then at the end of the simulation, I get a total score based on all of my episode scores, kind of weighted averages in each of the areas of how well I synthesized my learning, how well I connected with the different segments, how well I understood the concepts. So this does give assessment that helps the learner, but also helps the education professional know that their students are performing critical thinking. So that's where I'm going to take my break again and let Jody talk about the final section here. Oh, and actually, Jody, let me look. I see there's some question and answers. I see the cost of the simulation and how is the simulation similar to GlobeIS. We'll tackle those. I'm going to let Jody finish her next section, and then I'll get to all of the questions. But if anybody else has questions, please do put those in the chat bar or in the Q&A. So,
all right, so this next section is going to look at the impact a simulated education environment has on a student's ownership of their educational outcomes. Christina mentioned earlier the 2016 Loveless study regarding the use of simulations in developing critical thinking skills. This study was not specific to One Day, but rather covered the methodology of web-based simulation and its impact on critical thinking, skill development compared to traditional learning experiences. The simulated environments allow students to access realistic, real-time scenarios and decisions similar to what they would encounter in a workplace environment. Like a workplace, the student experiences immediate feedback and must adjust their strategy accordingly. The researchers hypothesized simulations increase student knowledge and learning retention because of the interactive nature of the educational experience. This type of learning grabs the student's attention and maintains it throughout the simulation, increasing information recall. The study indicated a positive correlation between student critical thinking skill development and the use of simulation-based educational software. Student feedback showed students felt the simulation was beneficial to them and felt the simulated environment felt more conducive to the development and use of critical thinking skills than traditional learning. Our own experience with partners in higher education mirrors these findings. And this leads us into the case studies that we've done with some of our clients. The first one is Dr. Olaf J Groth from the Hult International Business School. Dr. Groth talked about the faculty being resistant to change and wondering if the simulation technology would eventually replace faculty completely. He said he himself was one of those staff members. After getting a feel for the technology, he truly believes that it can help faculty make teaching more customized and personalized for today's students. He shared that One Day allows him to focus on the fulfilling and fun things about being a teacher, coaching and discussions with students on the concepts, not the minutia. Dr. Groth shared, it's probably not teaching if you're really just there to repeat routine tasks over and over, cash your paycheck and go home. One Day allows class discussions to be livelier and more interactive than traditional learning methods. And his students learned lessons of time management and the importance of peer interactions. They expressed feeling like the simulations were more real life centered than reading from a text, and the time constraints made the simulation feel very lifelike. Another one of our clients, Dr. William S. Lightfoot at Southern New Hampshire University, also tested out the One Day simulation. He used in a handful of courses to determine if it would better meet our students where they are as digital natives than traditional teaching methods do. Students were not putting effort into traditionally taught courses, and the faculty were trying to find a solution. Perhaps many of you guys find yourself in a similar situation. Perhaps a simulation would get the attention of students who grew up playing video games, was what Dr. Lightfoot thought. Dr. Lightfoot found that SNHU students were more engaged in the simulation, with over 70% of students out of 150 referring to the avatar in the first person in their reflection papers. Because of the knowledge gained through use of One Day, SNHU is adapting their capstone undergraduate business course and the foundation courses for their MBA program. Students are increasingly disengaged, and the amount of time spent preparing outside of class was declining. Simulation-based learning increased student engagement, preparation outside of class, teamwork, and presented Dr. Lightfoot with results he hadn't seen in 25 years of teaching. One thing that he did share with us was a specific student feedback. This student said, "I don't like education. I've only ever gone because my parents forced me to. On top of that, I don't like simulations. I am not a game player. So when I was in a class that had a simulation, I was not excited at all." I kind of felt the same way, I'm not going to lie. I was very upset. By the third episode of this simulation, however, I realized that I was enjoying education for one of the first times in my life. I was learning, and I didn't want the simulation to end. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was actually learning something important by taking a class.
Thank you, Jody. I was trying to unmute myself because I found that so powerful. Thank
It
you.
is very powerful to
Yeah,
take a student who
I didn't
hates
want to do
education and
this. Yeah.
doesn't want to learn at all and is dragging their feet, and to have them say that they learned so much out of that class is very powerful, and it speaks highly of simulated
Right.
environments.
Okay. So that I guess we wanted to talk then about what are the barriers to student engagement? Do you see any of these barriers in your experience? So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll as well. Where are my polls? Student engagement. I'm going to go ahead and launch this polling. So which of the following do you see as the greatest barrier to student engagement? So do you think that students don't see the real application of the concepts? They don't see the relevance? Do you think that the instruction doesn't cater to different learning styles? It's really focused on one? Is it too much lecture or too much reading and writing? Or is there something else that maybe you could put in the chat bar if you think there's something that's coming up that might be a real barrier? We're seeing kind of a mixed bag here. We've had, getting a little over half of the people. Okay. Right now, we're getting, it keeps going back and forth, but we're seeing that not enough attention to different learning styles, too much reading and writing. These are some obstacles. I'll go ahead and end the polling there. What I find really interesting about this, and I'll tell you, and I said it before, the one-day simulation isn't quick and easy. It's something that a student really has to get involved in, but they do get involved in it rather than, if there's too much reading and writing, or it doesn't cater to the different learning styles. Dr. Lightfoot Bill Lightfoot at Southern New Hampshire found his students weren't doing work outside of class. They were just coming to class and they weren't preparing. So the one-day simulation actually got them involved, where they were doing a couple of hours every week of the simulation. And that let him actually talk about the application of what they'd learned through the simulation. So that was kind of nice that it wasn't just the reading and writing. But thank you for sharing your results there. And then before we can continue on there, I see Joanna Dugan has, hi Joanne, you wrote that your graduate program courses are only 5 weeks. So how could you consider incorporating a 6-week simulation? A person wouldn't have to do one episode every week. It depends on how many times you meet, but I would say, it depends on how your assignments are structured. I would definitely expect students to spend 2 or 3 hours per episode. So, if there's one of those that you could break into two, or maybe the last 2 episodes could be done concurrently in the last week of your program. But there's different ways you could break it out, and we will provide access to anyone who wants to try the simulation. After this webinar, we're going to do another poll where we ask you to say, what can we get for you? And that way you can, if you want access to it, you can try it out, and we can have that discussion and talk about implementation plans. But let's see here. Go back to my screen share here real quick. So, and the case studies that Jody just talked about with Hult International and with Southern New Hampshire, those are available in the White Studies. We invite you to visit peregrineglobal.com, our website, and you can download those. But in addition, we do have some other white papers that we've published over the last year. So the one day here, you can see the one-day strategy simulation is one of the white papers that gives examples from our client schools that have used it. But then we also have other white papers that are available if you want to see how these are being applied in higher education, including academic leveling, getting students ready for their graduate programs, making sure they have that foundation so that it improves your retention, your success rates. We have some case studies on business program assessment and how that continuous improvement process has actually improved student performance over time. We have some other white papers here. Value skills is a soft skill assessment that we've launched in the past year or so, and talking about how we can foster workplace competencies as students enter the workplace, and then global business education programs for teaching business outside of the United States and how that continuous improvement process is being pursued. So I'm going to get to the questions, but I have one more question for you guys before we get started, is this last poll question, what we can do for you. So let me do that, and then I will get to the Q&A that we were going to do. So if you don't mind, you've hung out with us here for over a half hour. What can we do for you now? And you can choose more than one of these if you want. But if you would like to demo access the one-day simulation so you can get in there and see it for yourself, if you want us to send you access to the white papers, or, at this time, nothing, but let us know when we have an upcoming webinar. Also, if anybody wants to have an individual consultation, just a little video chat with one of us so you can tell us what you're working at, and we could, kind of discuss options. We're available there too. So I won't be sharing these results. I'm just gathering this information for my own selfish purposes, but I'll let you respond there. And then let's go ahead and get to some of the questions and answers that we had. So one of the questions, Dr. Daisy Valentine, how similar is this simulation to GloBiz? I'm not really, I got to say, I'm not familiar with GloBiz. I am familiar with some of the other simulations out there that are more team-based simulations where students are working on them together. The difference with those at one day is a student can do them all on their own. They go through the simulation in the role of a young professional. But then as Southern New Hampshire did, they did reflection papers, they did group discussions on the simulation, so they can be used in a group context, but they can also be used for students that might be pursuing their studies in an asynchronous environment. So I don't know. I'll have to look into GloBiz. That's not one that I'm real familiar with.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one either, so I'll have to look into it as well.
And then you also asked about the cost of the simulation for the institution and the student. All of the one-day simulation forms part of Peregrine's portfolio of what we call leading edge learning. There are different modules, and the base price, if a person just wanted to buy this on their own, is $150. And like I said, that's going to include all the resources. It can kind of replace a textbook or software. It has the embedded articles, the resources. So it's kind of a one-stop shop in that case. But if you do decide you want to build a package, you want to do some soft skill assessment, you want to do maybe some leadership training, we bundle things into different packages, so we'd be able to talk to you then. Oh yeah, I see some people are leaving, so thank you. I see that some of you are getting back to your day jobs of teaching. So I have another question here. Simulation to case analysis. How long is the setup time for each simulation? Well, these are actually ready to go. Mm-hmm. So if Peregrine is launching some new case studies as well, which is nice. Case methods can be very good for students really digging into the depth of a concept. But the simulation is going to cover everything from different perspectives, so they can work complementary to each other. The setup time, if you decided you want to launch this for your students this fall, we would just have to get with you and get it embedded perhaps into your learning management system, and then show you how you can use the access. But these are ready to go. So let us know if we can talk to you about maybe trying this and seeing if it might be a good solution for your students. So let's see. I think that's all I have for the question and answers in my polling there. And then I see another question here. Is the pricing also based on the amount of users? Yes, we do offer discounts based on the amount of students using different services. So let us get together with you after this and look at some different options of how many students would be in a course and what the offer would be. Like I said, the base price for per student, if you wanted to purchase off our website, is $150. But if your university already uses some of Peregrine's assessments or other services, we offer volume discounts. So we could get together with you on that. But looks like I think that is about all for now. But I'm going to, oh, let me share my screen one more time because I have our contact information. You might need that. So here, if you think of a question that you didn't get a chance to ask during the webinar, mine is Perry at Peregrine Global. Jody's Rich at
Yep.
Peregrine Global. And then there's also our website, peregrineglobalservices.com. If you fill out the form there, we get notified too. So lots of ways to reach us. I wanted to thank you. I know your time is a valuable commodity, but this is an exciting new service that we're offering, and we're happy to have you be introduced to it. These are the references that we cited in our presentation. So if you want to go back and see how other professionals have studied the use of simulations, there you go. But thank you for joining us today. And then please do stay in touch, join us for future webinars, and let us know if we can talk to you and see what you're doing in your institution and how we can help you out.